Thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk about keyword match types. My name is Nick. I'm the CEO of Sellozo. We really chose this topic today because, over the last few years, we've spent literally thousands of hours on the phone helping sellers, teaching them about our tools, and also just really providing general consulting on selling. And we actually get a ton of questions about match types. And it's funny because on the surface, broad, phrase, and exact match types seem fairly straightforward, but finding the best ways to use them for your business and for your products and, understanding the edge cases is really important. There's some pro tips that we can tell you about today. I've actually got Brock with me today, who's our head of support. And this guy is a seller himself, and he's a rock star at helping people grow their seller businesses. I do want to let you know to stick around to the end of the presentation because we actually have a code to get a free trial and a great discount on your first paid month with Sellozo. So stick around for that, and I'll hand it off to Brock.
Sounds good. Can everyone see my screen? Just making sure we're good here. All right. So this is a really interesting topic because a lot of people think it's an extremely beginner topic, but in reality, there's a lot of complexities to it, and there's no straight answer. A lot of times people will come to us and they have a very clear understanding of what the different match types are, broad, phrase, and exact, and then they maybe have a new phase to their product life cycle, and then things totally change for them. And so that's why we thought it'd be a good topic today to cover. So what we're going to be covering specifically is the three match types. We'll go into some details, some nuances of them. We'll talk about some hybrid combinations when you would want to use multiple at the same time, in conjunction, in parallel. We'll also talk about when you might want to use one specific one. The next thing is, of course, when you want to avoid certain match types. We all know it can get extremely expensive when you do use some of them. And then the different situations when you want to do that. And then finally, just how to generally optimize for profit, what we all want, bottom line. All right, so let's go ahead and flip to a tab where I can visualize what I'm going to be talking about. All right. So for those not familiar with what this is our campaign studio. What I'm going to talk about today, you do not have to be a Sellozo customer to learn from it or anything like that. But I just want to bring this up because it allows me to show you what I'm talking about in a way that is easy to maneuver. But everything right here you can do manually. None of what we're talking about today requires this, but I will be using it just for the visualization today. All right, so the first thing to talk about is the three different match types. So let me go ahead and pull up the slide for this, and then I'll be flipping between these two tabs whenever we actually go through the use cases. All right, so the first thing is the broad match. This one's obviously the widest net. It's by definition the broadest. And this is whenever you really want to gather a lot of information. This matches not only on the term you put in, it will also match on misspellings, it'll match on plural, it'll match on synonyms as well. Basically, it matches related to your product. This is Amazon's algorithm. Determining on what exactly is relevant, what exactly is a synonym, and what exactly is a close enough match to be considered broadly matching what you put in. The most impressions will always come on broad match, by the way. Phrase match, so this is getting a little more specific, a little more narrow. This allows you to specify a phrase. So not only does it require the customer to specifically type in the words you entered, it actually specifies the order. So it's the phrase. So it is a little more specific. It's a little more narrow. So there are fewer impressions on this one. But at the same time, you will cut out some more of the broad terms, the terms that maybe aren't as relevant. And then the final one, the one people are most familiar with, I'm sure, is exact match. This one's most restricted by definition, and it must exactly match. So it can't just contain the phrase that you want. It will actually contain the exact order, the exact words, nothing more, nothing less. Now, it does include misspellings. It does also include singular and plural. So if you do have that, you will notice it's not exact, but it is nearly the exact term you put in. All right, so let's actually dive into that, because this is where some of the nuances come in, and then I can flip back over to the Campaign Studio and show you how we would use these in different situations. The kind of example we're using today is just Red Hat, and we have this graph to show each of the different matches. And so you can see there's broad, phrase, and exact. So with broad, of course, if your keyword is Red Hat for women, it contains the phrase. So of course, broad is going to match as well. It's very relevant. Phrase will also match because Red Hat is in it. The phrase in the order that we see that we put in as a keyword is in here. Now, exact match, it contains for women, and so we would cut that off. Exact match does not match to this keyword. Now, let's get into some of the maybe more specific examples that might not be as well known. So take, for example, red hats. So while the keyword was red hat, since this is a plural version of that keyword, Amazon will still actually give you traction on the exact match. So this is very common for you to have a singular and a plural version. So you might have red hat and red hats in your campaign. It is recommended, but generally Amazon will send all of the traffic to the one with the highest bid. Not a bad thing to have both, but the exact match will match both of them. Now, the next kind of outlier here is whenever you have a synonym. So this is buy red beret. And we have a little emoji face here. And this is because you're a little bit at the mercy of Amazon when you use broad match. And the reason being is, while red hat, technically buy red beret, a red beret is a type of red hat. And so if Amazon views this as similar enough, related enough, or a synonym, which in this case it probably would be, Amazon will match it. It's not guaranteed. It is based on their algorithm. And so when you have broad match keywords, you will sometimes be bidding on keywords that are totally different than the word you entered as a keyword. And it'll bid when customers search for something that doesn't even contain the same words. This is sometimes confusing to people, but at the same time, it just allows you to enter fewer keywords and gather many, many more impressions. So it's very important to watch your broad match keywords, because they can get out of control really quickly. Because if somebody is typing in buy red beret or red beret, and you have a red baseball cap, well, of course, that's not relevant enough. But to Amazon, that's a synonym, and you could be bidding on it. Now, typically, broad match keywords are really, while they're broad, they're also lower cost because you are bidding on such a wide assortment of keywords at the same time. So there are some perks to each. And even if you understand this, you might not know what's the best mix or specific match type to use for your products. So the next thing I'm going to get into here is when you want to use each one of them for specific products. I'll leave it on this slide for next, and I'll flip back to the Campaign Studio. All right, so we just have a test account pulled up here with the test ad group. And just to make things simple, I've named everything very clearly with what I'm going to be talking about. We have our automatic campaign here, a broad, a phrase, and an exact. Now, I've done this just for simplicity of the demonstration, but this could, of course, be all in the same ad group in one campaign. This could be in different ad groups in one campaign. Or this could be separate campaigns. What I'm going to be talking today is not specific to campaign separate match types. This is just for the sake of the example. So one of the first things I get is just what's the most profitable match type. And if you are looking for a blanket statement and I had to answer for a majority of cases what the most profitable match type is, I would tell you to use automatic to exact match. So I would send your automatic search term, so pulling your search term report or using a software, I would take search terms and send them to exact match. The reason being is exact match is the most specific. It only includes misspelling and singular and plural. It allows you to have a lot more control. And so if you are looking to get the most bang for your buck as far as advertising goes, I almost always recommend going just auto to exact. Now, that's a general blanket statement. So let's talk about some of the outliers here and why you definitely need to be using broad and phrase in a lot of situations. While exact match is the most narrow and gives you the most control, and it allows you to be the most granular with your bidding, what it could be missing out on is other long tail variations of the keywords you're already bidding on. And that's because exact match, it does not allow them to add any other longer tail words in your search term. It will only bid on the exact match. And so you could be missing out on a lot of really profitable opportunities if you strictly use exact match. Now, if you use broad match, let's say you went automatic just to a broad match, this would be the exact opposite end of the spectrum. You're casting the widest net, and you're likely going to be doing a whole bunch of bidding on keywords that are not very relevant to your product. And this could be very expensive because they will typically have a lower conversion rate. Now, the plus side of this is that you're casting such a wide net that you're going to discover so many new keywords that you would never have discovered before. So let's get into why you might want to use a combination, because this is what most people will end up finding as the best fit for them, and then they will cycle into an exact match. So what I mean by that is using multiple match types at the same time. And let me add my exact match campaign back in one more time. And again, this is not specific to campaigns, ad groups, or anything. This is just talking about the match type. I'm just using this for the sake of the demonstration. So if you are launching a new product and you send automatic to exact match, you're taking a very optimization focused approach where you're finding every new keyword and you're transferring them to exact match, and you're not bidding on the long tail keywords. This will be the lowest cost way for you to discover keywords because you are only adding keywords that have previously converted. So exact match is going to be the most profitable way to discover those keywords. It's going to be the slowest though. So if you're launching a new product and you have a very small budget, going straight to exact match is perfect. But let's say you're launching a product in a very competitive niche. And this can be extremely difficult for you to get the organic ranking you need to really break through in this niche. Going to exact match probably won't cut it. If you're in a very small niche, exact match might cut it, but more competitive niches, you're going to definitely have to use broad and phrase match keywords, one, the other, or both, to break through, because you're not just going to be able to target the exact match terms and get enough traction in a competitive niche. So for this one, you might want to actually go broad, phrase, and exact and use all match types. And so what I'm showing right now is what you would do manually or through a software to prioritize keyword testing. So this would be if you had a very large budget and you're willing to spend a lot of money up front in the testing phase, figure out which keywords are profitable for your product quickly. While it's expensive and unprofitable in the beginning, it will get you to a profitable state much quicker. And so what this is showing is a broad match keyword that once it converts in the automatic campaign, you create it as a broad, then you create it as a phrase, then you create it as an exact. So you have all three match types. And this could, again, be in the ad group or the campaign. Now, this will be the most expensive, but it will also get you to an optimal state the quickest because it is testing so many keywords so quickly, and you're pulling in every single long tail phrase, synonym, misspelling, everything all at once. Now, if you do not have a whole bunch of budget to launch a product, and this is something you need to be a little more conservative about, I strongly suggest picking broad, phrase, one or the other, and exact match. So for a new product launch, I definitely think that you should pick one of the two, broad and phrase, in conjunction with exact. If this is an established product and you're just launching a new campaign, that's when I would probably gravitate towards exact match because it's a lot more affordable. So let's go ahead and talk about the differences between broad and phrase then, and when you would want to pick one or the other when, say, exact match is not enough and you're not capturing enough of the long tail keywords. So if you are selling a product that is extremely, the niche is large. It's a product that maybe a good example is socks. if you're selling socks and you're launching a new pair of socks, and it's not a very niche pair of socks, say it's not some very specific pattern of sock that people are just going to search for that, I would gravitate towards phrase match and exact match instead of broad and exact. And the reason being is broad match is going to capture so many searches that are not relevant enough and will not have good enough conversion rate, and it would be very unprofitable. Now, phrase match to exact match would be how I would launch something, say like a new pair of socks. Now, let's say you have something very, very niche. You have a product that there might only be one page of results that are your specific product. You might have a supplement that's not very well known, or you might have a pair of socks with a very unique pattern, like bananas. If you're selling a banana print sock, I would say that you're specific enough where the only thing that's going to match to it is banana kind of terms or funny socks or something like that. So those are those really narrow niches. Then it becomes okay to use broad match because it's a very specific product. If broad becomes too expensive, you can just switch it over to phrase match and exact match. But the main takeaway here that I really want to emphasize is no matter what you do between broad and phrase, I always have an exact match in the pattern. So let's delete this link. So if you decide to go with broad match as your keyword, because you have a very niche product, is very specific, then I would pick broad to exact. I would never leave off the exact match, because at the end of the day, exact match will give you the most control, and all of those long tail keywords you discover in the broad match, you will be able to optimize them in the exact and have more control of the bid. So again, either one, broad or phrase, make sure you also are running an exact match for those keywords and transfer keywords from your broad and phrase to your exact. All right, let me see here. We have a whole bunch of questions. Well, let me actually go through. I'm going to talk about the pro tip, and then we can have plenty of time to answer the questions here. So I'm sure some of the people say in the sock category, socks are super broad if you're just selling kind of a color of sock. This is a pro tip here. This is, a lot of people don't know about it, and it can be very valuable. It's only for sponsor brands, so you do have to be brand registered and running sponsor brand campaigns. This was released not too long ago, and so I do suspect that it will be very shortly accessible everywhere. But on your sponsor brand campaigns, there might be a situation where you do decide to put broad match keywords in there, but you want to have a little more control. So by definition, broad match can match on synonyms. So the example always given is shoes. If you are selling shoes and you have a broad match keyword for shoes, it will also match on the search term sneakers. It will match on loafers. It will match on other related terms to shoes. Let's say your shoes are super specific to one gender. Let's say you sell men's shoes, and while you're fine bidding on shoes, sneakers, loafers, all of the different ways to describe shoes, one thing you are not selling is, let's say, women's shoes. And so for you, you would love to bid on all of these broad related terms, but it just can't be for women. It has to have specifically for men, because there's way more searches on Amazon for women's sneakers, women's shoes than there are for men. And so you want to take advantage of that, but you still want the broad match. This is when you use the plus sign. So this is called a broad match modifier. And simply put, you put a plus sign in front of the word that you want to be required. So the example here, of course, men's shoes, this will require the search term to contain men. So for example, it would bid on, well, we use men, but, it would bid on men, loafers, sneakers, shoes, all of the above, but it could never bid on women's shoes, women's loafers, women's sneakers. So this is a perfect example where you want to use broad match, but you want to have a little more control, and you don't want to have to put in thousands of negative keywords to rein in the spend. This is a great way to do it. I only recommend it when you do have a very specific reason to use broad match. Of course, if you use phrase match instead, you could just use the phrase and then it would require it. So if you're launching a new product, this would be a perfect example when you're going to want to use broad match. You're okay with the keyword testing, but you want to make sure you're never bidding on anything except for people specifying that they want men's products. All right, so let me go ahead, put this up in case people are wanting it, and then we'll get to some questions. Okay.
So Wes had a question in the beginning. Do you feel this is similar to scoring how they match misspellings?
The broad?
Yeah.
That's a really good question. So personally, we're getting into a little bit of a nuance here as well. Personally, I think Amazon goes too far. There are lots of situations where I see an exact match matching to search terms that are not exact enough. And the only explanation is that it is thinking it's a misspelling. I've actually had a number of situations where a seller's very best search term was not what the keyword was at all. And so it matched to a keyword that it thought it was misspelling, and it was not. And they're very different. And so all of that data was showing up on a keyword that it really shouldn't have. So my personal take on the broad match, deciding when to use synonyms and related, I personally think that it's gone a little bit too far, and that it definitely can spend a lot more than it should if you're in a niche that has a lot of unique niches within it. So again, you're selling socks and you have all these unique niches. If you're selling white socks, you don't want to bid on banana print socks, or banana print, any term related to socks. That's the whole point, I guess. Now, if you have a very low bid on the broad match and you just want to cast a really wide net, it's a great way to get testing done. So while I think it's gone a little bit too far and it makes it hard to be super profitable on broad match, if you use that in conjunction with exact match, I think you have a very profitable combo there. In fact, it can be the most profitable combo of match types if you're just transferring those and you're really staying on top of the transfers. Phrase match, on the other hand, is very much that phrase, and it has a lot of control. And so you're going to have a much more narrow approach. And a lot of times those clicks can cost more, but it allows you to be more granular in what you're targeting.
Kareem had a question here, kind of in the middle. He's a client of Sellozo already, been with us for about a year. He says, when Sellozo optimizes his campaigns, does the system choose the type of keyword, exact phrase or broad, automatically for him?
Yeah, good question. That's dependent on how you launch the campaign. Our default is exact match. And like I stated before, that is the safest way, that is the most optimal way for you to start testing. And so our system defaults to exact match for that very reason. If you use our advanced launch flow, it actually gives you the option. You can do all the things I talked about. You could use broad, phrase, exact, all in parallel. You could daisy chain them together, or you could just do a standalone broad, a standalone phrase, a standalone exact. So while we do default to exact match because it is the safest, and for most sellers, it is the most profitable way to get keyword testing done, there is definitely a whole bunch of different presets where you can launch any of these patterns you want: broad to exact, broad phrase to exact, just like this. You could even do it like this. I mean, you can do it so extreme that I definitely don't want to say our system always uses one thing, but defaults to exact. All right, let's see. That's a good question, though. I definitely recommend, if you aren't sure what you want to do, look at your budget. If you're spending your entire budget on your exact match, I would not recommend using broader phrase. If you have plenty of budget left and you can't seem to spend your budget on your exact match campaign, that's a perfect time to start looking at either using a broad or phrase or both, depending on how close to your budget, your spend goal you want to be. I would suggest picking either or both. Let's see. Um, let's see, am I missing any other questions here? Oh, beauty presentation. I think we have.
Yeah, we'll post that. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Question about separating campaigns for match types.
Yeah. So I did mention that this is totally what I'm discussing today is separate from campaigns, ad groups. You could have all of these match types in the same ad group, in the same campaign, in separate campaigns. So let me actually talk about the differences of that and why you would want one or the other, because sometimes that can actually be more important to the profitability of your match type than the actual match type itself. So there's pros and cons of structuring it different ways. There's typically the best practice is actually to structure it how I'm showing it right now, having separate campaigns, but there's lots of reasons why you can't do this. So if you have separate campaigns, you can control the budget at the campaign level. You can decide maybe you're doing too much keyword testing and you could turn off your broad campaign. Now you can also do this if you have separate ad groups. Now the downside of having a single ad group with all match types mixed in it, and why I typically recommend structuring it either ad group level or campaign level, is you can't use negative keywords. So you notice I always emphasize that you have an exact match. No matter what you do, have an exact match. Whether you're using all three, two of them, or just one, use exact in conjunction or alone. The reason you want to have your exact match in a separate ad group, and if you're a vendor, probably just a separate campaign, but the reason why you're going to want to do that is actually for negatives. Negative keywords are applied at the ad group level. And if you mixed your broad match, phrase match, and exact match keywords all in the same ad group, you're going to run into a situation where you cannot force the broad match or the phrase match keyword to discover new long tail versions of that keyword, because you can't apply a negative to that broad or phrase match keyword because the exact match is mixed in the same ad group. So this is a huge downside. I highly recommend that if you do mix your broad and phrase together, at least separate out the exact match into its own ad group. Now, the benefit of having broad, phrase, and exact ad groups under the same campaign is, of course, just fewer campaigns, a cleaner campaign structure. You can still use negative keywords at the ad group level. So you can pull those long tail keywords out of the broad and phrase match and send them to exact. So that's a huge benefit. The downside is, of course, if your broad or phrase match starts getting really expensive and you start running out of budget every day, well, it'll probably spend your budget on the broad and phrase, it being Amazon, that are at a lower profitability than the exact match. And so if you run out of budget, your exact match never had the opportunity to bid on those really profitable keywords. So by having the exact match pulled out into their own campaign, you have more budget control and you can force more of this spend on the exact match type, the more profitable type, than the broad and phrase. That's a good question. All right, the next one is, okay. So that is definitely important. Let's say you're bringing an existing account into, well, the question is Sellozo, but any situation where you're using existing data and you already have an ACoS that say is too high. Let's say you've been tasked to work on it, or you just decide it's too high based on your profitability. I definitely recommend doing everything in phases. So if you are doing automatic to exact match right now, and your ACoS is too high, say you turn on the optimizer or you're just trying to adjust bids, I definitely would not be doing broad and phrase match keywords while you're trying to bring down your ACoS. If your exact match campaign can't hit a target ACoS, it's definitely not the right time to start testing broad and phrase match. That likely will result in much higher testing spend and much less spend on the optimized exact match. Now, bringing the ACoS down on the exact match, I do recommend always doing it in phases. If you do anything too dramatically, there's well, a lot of people believe Amazon is purposely seeing that you're cutting these off, and then they force the volume lower. But whether that's true or not, the main thing is that you want to monitor your changes as you go. So I recommend not dropping your bids significantly if you're doing this manually, or if you're using Sellozo, I recommend lowering the ACoS target slowly, gradually. So say you're at 40% and you want to get down to 10%. Let's just say you need it really low. I would recommend doing it maybe at 10% increments. And the same for bid adjustment. So if you're doing this manually and you're adjusting your keyword bids on your exact match, trying to bring the ACoS down, do it little bit by little bit. Wait a couple days and see, because lowering your bid changes your placement sometimes, and you might find that the most profitable bid is higher or lower. It just depends. And so gradually lowering it or raising it will typically show you where that sweet spot is. Let's see. That was a good one. Do we have any other questions I missed? Kim or Nick, do you see any?
I think we've got all the questions.
Yep, I think we're good.
So in Sellozo, we do have a bunch of predefined patterns that people can test and use as well. So, when you launch, you don't need to create these from scratch. Brock may even be able to show that in a launching of campaigns. Our tool makes it pretty easy to test, different ways of configuring your campaigns. So in our advanced launcher here, you can choose a pattern, and we've got a list of a variety of patterns.
Just pick something here. It's just a count. So here's actually some of the patterns. As you can see, we always recommend auto to exact, and that's what we default to. So if you're wondering, what Sellozo is going to pick for the keyword, it's going to be exact match unless you specify otherwise. But as you can see here, there is a lot of different patterns for you to pick. So you don't have to set this up on your own, although you definitely could through spreadsheets. So auto, broad, exact, another very popular pattern. It definitely emphasizes keyword testing a lot more than just exact match. It might pick up things that the automatic campaign has never picked up before because of that related search term, just like the beret and the hats term. Even more of an emphasis is if you wanted to then every single term that converted in your broad match here, move it to the phrase. That's the most extreme keyword testing you can possibly do. That will allow you to literally every single related term, synonym, anything, once it's created as a phrase match, it pulls out all the phrases of that. And so this is just the end all be all for, I want as much keyword testing. I'm okay with spending a lot upfront to get it done. I just want to find every keyword possible. This would be the one you want to go with. If you're having trouble with profitability, this is definitely not the one you want to go with. In fact, this is going to spend the most money and likely will have the highest ACoS upfront, but it might also bring you in the most sales. So newly launched products, definitely something to think about here. And then you can definitely do some different things. So you could skip the automatic campaign entirely. I do typically recommend having the automatic campaign. It's one of those things where Amazon finds so many search terms that you might not have thought about. So it's just really important to have that. And if you did decide that your automatic campaign is really expensive though, and you just don't want it, it is rare, but you might want to do the broad phrase exact then and skip that. So all of these are default patterns, and you can customize anything like that and create any flow you want as well. So.
I think Wes had another question here.
Yeah.
There's still a couple coming in yet.
Oh yeah. This is a good one. June. Yeah. That's a really good question. This one's getting a little more in depth here, but it's a great one. So Amazon does use click-through rate for sure. Amazon general rule of thumb applies here. Amazon just wants to make as much money as possible. And we all know that we're the ones paying for the clicks, right? Like we know they're going up. And we know they're increasing the number of ads per page. In fact, just this week, they announced that they were going to take even more of the page up by ads. They increased the sponsored brand headline search placement by 20%. So it's 20% larger. So 20%, less or more ads before you get to products. And so they're doing this because they want to increase the number of ad clicks. They want to make more money. But at the end of the day, they would much rather get a product sale than just an ad click. And so, the question is, do they use click-through rate in determining placement or how often the ads are shown? And that's 100% true, because if you have a really low click-through rate on your ad, they're not going to give you placement on that ad. So an extreme example is if you're selling socks and tennis ball, you add to your keywords. Obviously, that's not relevant at all, but let's just say that you somehow had a high enough relevancy score to get some impressions. Your ad would have such a low click-through rate that within just a matter of days, Amazon would probably stop giving you any impressions at all on it. So having a good click-through rate is important. One thing to note here is that Amazon does view placements differently. I do think it's worth, if you're trying to really aggressively rank the product, I do think it's important to look at your click-through rate. But at the same time, if you have some really low bid keywords that are profitable and the click-through rate isn't great on them, but they're profitable, definitely don't turn those off. I think getting conversions is the most important thing, but click-through rate is definitely a factor in it. I don't think cost per click, the second part of the question, I don't think cost per click is viewed as, it's not as important. The reality is if you have a poor click-through rate, you could put your bid up to $5 and you're not going to have a really high cost per click. You're just not going to get any impressions whatsoever. If you're willing to pay a lot more, I'm sure they're more willing to give you placement. We see that. But at the same time, if you have a poor click-through rate, they don't really care how much you bid. They're probably going to stop showing your ad eventually because they care more about conversions than just a couple clicks. Using these metrics to set up your hero campaign, the second part of that question. Hero campaign, for those who don't know, is like your most important keywords. So these are the ones where you want to give them unlimited budget. They should be able to spend throughout the entire day, no matter what. And if you could spend your entire budget on hero keywords and no keyword testing at all, you would do that. So I do think you have to have a good click-through rate to put a keyword in your hero campaign. That having said, you really can't have a hero keyword if it doesn't have a good click-through rate. A good conversion rate almost always means a good click-through rate. They don't really, it's just super rare to have a bad click-through rate and a good conversion rate. All right, I think that answered the second part of the question as well there. All right, the next question is, if you already have broad match mixed in with your exact match, do you think separating it or yes, actually, to the person asking that, I do think it might be worth separating it for you. There are some clear benefits here. So let me take this example here and show you what I would do. So let's just go back to the Campaign Studio so I can give you a visualization. All right, so let's just say that you have this manual campaign has your broad and your exact in it. What I would actually end up doing is, let's just say you have an auto to one manual and you have all of your match types in this manual, like the question's talking about. What I would simply do is open up the Campaign Studio, click Add Manual, and then draw the link, and just make sure that you use exact match. So what's going to happen here is it's going to transfer all of your exact match, as well as any search terms that convert from your broad and phrase into this new campaign. Now, you could create a new ad group. You don't have to spawn a new campaign. You could just go into your existing manual campaign. And I don't have one selected here. But if you just drew this link to itself and you create a new ad group that has nothing but exact match in it, the optimizer will transfer all of the search terms from both the broad phrase and exact into this new ad group. And then it will add negative exact to that ad group that has the mixture in it. We actually just recently had a case where somebody came to us, was struggling to get their ACoS down like another 10%. And we noticed a couple of their main campaigns had a mixture of keywords. Just by creating that exact match ad group, it made all of the difference and actually dropped their ACoS significantly below it. So I do think it would be worth you setting up an extra exact match ad group in that campaign and linking it to itself like I have done here, or creating a new exact match campaign. It's up to you which you prefer. It's just budget control at that point. Let's see. Next question here. Oh, yeah, perfect. I think I answered that one. Let's see. Does anyone have any other questions? Have I missed any of them? So this question's referencing running out of budget. Okay, so this is tough. So this is when you are running out of budget is what this question's about, and I'll kind of tie it into the match type as well. And I did mention it earlier here, but if you are running out of budget and on an optimization campaign, it is extremely important to not be doing a lot of keyword testing. And the reason being there is, let's say you have $100 a day. Let's just use this campaign pattern I have right now. And I'll make this the extreme example. So you have an automatic going to a broad match, going to a phrase match, going to a exact match. Let's say you have this most extreme keyword testing pattern going on. The downside of running out of budget is you could be running out of budget at 1 a.m. You could be essentially gathering data on your keywords, broad phrase and exact, from midnight to 1 a.m. or midnight till 4 a.m. And obviously, unless your product is meant to be purchased during those hours, a lot of people aren't shopping for your stereotypical products during those hours. Some might do well there, but for a majority of people, you're going to run out of budget really early. So like I said before, I would definitely do an automatic to exact match before doing any other kind of keyword testing if you're running out of budget. I would put all of the budget towards your exact match and get that to an optimal state before you do anything else if you're running out of budget. Now, there are some more advanced things you can do when you're running out of budget to make your data more accurate. You can pause your campaigns from midnight or 11 p.m. all the way until, say, 8 a.m. Or noon for that matter, and then turn your ads on basically when people go to lunch and then when they get off work, more of the peak buying hours. So this would definitely be a thought here is pausing and enabling your campaigns, trying to get the budget to be spent during the optimal times of the day. So I would definitely suggest going straight to exact match if you're running out of budget. You're definitely not going to get ideal data unless you do have your campaign running throughout the entire day, or you're optimizing based on time of the day. So maybe you target that lunch hour. We do offer day parting in our PPC manager where you can pause and enable your campaigns for this very reason. And so your click-through rate, your conversion rate could be much lower on your keywords during that 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. hours. And I would definitely cut those clicks off before I cut off the afternoon and evening clicks, just because those clicks are typically higher conversion rate unless you have a unique niche. Hopefully that answers that question. Mm. So yeah, sponsored brands are very new for the Campaign Studio, and you can add a sponsor brand, but you'll notice we do not actually have automation automatically adding keywords here. And that's because this is extremely limiting. So we do have some things on the roadmap for this, but sponsor brands cannot have nearly as many keywords as a sponsored product. I believe it's a tenth of the keywords that your sponsor product campaigns can have. And that's why, actually, I'll go back to this slide here. This here, the broad match modifier, this is really important for sponsor brands because it allows you to have more control while still targeting a wider amount of keywords. So instead of having 5,000 exact match keywords for every one of your search terms, you could have, say, 400 broad match and then just put some modifiers in there. That way, your broad match is targeting more keywords without having the limitations that are just Amazon set for sponsor brands. Now, if you put them into the Campaign Studio like this, you'll notice that it's not for transfer reasons. It's really just for reporting reasons. While we put this in here because we do plan to have a new system that will allow transfers to sponsor brand ads, we have to make sure it's a lot more controlled because you could cap out the number of keywords in your sponsor brand really quickly if you set it up linked to your auto and broad and phrase. And then you might not transfer the good keywords. So the reason we have sponsor brands here in the Campaign Studio, besides just it's on the roadmap for a different transfer rule, and we'll tease that here in a second, actually. But it's for reporting reasons. So this is just a dummy account, but these campaign groups under the Campaign Group tab, if you click down to the group and you want to just view that group and say a sponsor brand is part of that group, it would show up here. And so that's why we allow you to put them into the studio right away, even though we aren't allowing the links right now. So I might as well bring it up now since I mentioned it. But one of the features that's going to be coming out shortly is actually search term modifiers on the automation. So this would allow you to have transfer rules based on the search term containing or not containing a certain phrase or term. So if you wanted to, say, transfer all of your competitors' brand terms to a specific campaign with a higher target ACoS, it would do that for you. This gives a lot more control and reduces the number of keywords that you're going to be transferring. And that's why I think this is going to play a really big part in getting to keyword transfer automation on sponsor brand campaigns. That'll be coming out soon too. So I'm very excited to release that. All right. I hope that answers the question about if they work similar to sponsored products. They are definitely more limiting, sponsor brands. And so we right now, I do recommend that if you are transferring keywords to a sponsored brand campaign, you pick your top performing keywords and you think about maybe using a broad match with that plus symbol, the modifier, on those keywords. You can definitely do that using the tool, but just not using the automation. So you could definitely export a list of your keywords or in Seller Central, your top performing keywords, and then you could use that broad match modifier, add that in, and that would specify that you don't bid on women's shoes, but you have, a broad match term for men's shoes. Okay, this is just a unrelated feature. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it here. Yeah, I won't on this test account. We did release a small Sellozo logo on keywords that were created by the system, just so you can see that moving forward and see which ones were added and created by the automation. So that was one of the comments that came in. That is a new release too. We should have quite a few new releases coming out here in the next month. I'm really excited about the keyword transfer rules. We'll definitely do another video on that and different, more advanced techniques for that. All right.
Cool. I think that's great, Brock. Thanks a lot for going through all that with us today. I just want to thank everybody for coming and joining us today. I know it's, with a lot of people working from home and, being busy with kids and different things. We appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day to jump in and listen to us talk about match types. So we're going to be doing more and more of these sort of lunch and learns and webinars coming forward. So just kind of keep an eye on your email and look for these, and we'll hopefully see you at a future event. And we'll also be posting all these videos, probably on YouTube or on our website here in the next few days or whatever. So thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, guys. Email if you have any other questions. Have a great one.